Hello, everyone, and happy Wednesday. Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, The Strategies for Joining the Digital Credentials Transformation, How the CLR Can Support Continuing Education Initiatives at Your Institution. Just a couple of housekeeping items while everybody gets settled. We are using the Zoom webinar platform for today's webinar, so your mics and cameras are disabled by default. If you have any technical issues during the webinar, please use the chat function and select all panelists, and we will work with you directly to sort it out. If at any time during the webinar you have questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function. Please note that we will be holding all questions until after the presentation. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Suzanne Carbonaro, Director of Academic Partnerships with APHIS.
Oh, thank you so much, colleagues at ACRO, Annetta and Summer, for being here today and giving us the opportunity to allow our academic partners who are doing terrific work in the field to showcase what they are doing to meet the needs of this digital credentials transformation that we're all in. And as you said, CLR is an important part of continuing education today, or it's starting to become a player in it. And I'm so excited to have an opportunity to bring all of these great leaders together. Higher education really has shown a lot of resiliency and success in the digital transformation strategies linked to supporting innovative designs and curriculum and delivery models aimed at providing value to students. In a 2021 Association of American Colleges and Universities, AAC&U workforce analysis report, a diverse set of employers share their views on workforce preparedness and the outcomes, skills, and experiences they most value in recruiting their team members for jobs. This analysis serves as a reminder to higher education that students need to be able to translate their learning from one setting to another in order to support these very specific workforce needs and responsibilities. And as I said, comprehensive learner record as a dynamic verified record of student achievements across curricular, co-curricular, and experiential learning activities really can provide evidence of student learning in real time, giving institutional administrators, student advisors, employers, and the students themselves a window into their learning. This session will focus on how higher education institutions across the country are answering the call for digital transformation, providing programming for adult learners, leading to badging and CLR for recognition of skills and portability for sharing with employers. Today, we have colleagues representing higher education institutions to discuss their individual digital transformation. First, we'll hear from Dr. Janet Schreck and Dr. Chadia Abras from Johns Hopkins University. Next, we will learn from Dr. Andrew Wolf and Colleen Johnson at the University of Rochester School of Nursing. And finally, we'll round out our conversation with discussion points from Dr. Sherry Braxton, who wears a few hats. She's a consultant with the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and she is a new member to Bowdoin College in Maine. My name is Suzanne Carbonaro, and I'm the Director of Academic Partnerships here at APHIS. And I'm going to move, into some information about APHIS, and then we'll go directly into the presentation today. So if you're not familiar with APHIS, APHIS is an all-in-one assessment platform with integrated solutions that streamline the assessment challenges for institutions of higher education and their stakeholders. At APHIS, our view of the EdTech landscape has led us to see that it's populated by many disparate solutions that require individual integration, which can, sort of add to a lot of complexity. Our approach has been to create a complete set of tools that are unified with a common data store and a common workflow engine that reduces this complexity and increases efficiencies compared to integrating a fabric of different point solutions. So APHIS has these 8 integrated solutions engineered to work together and provide you with multiple measures from which you can make decisions. So if it happens in one solution, it can be pulled into or made visible in another. And our partners across the country have gotten very innovative with these solutions as well. And in particular, they've used things like the data collection to serve as a forms and workflow solution to support a number of efforts, including outcomes assessment and program assessment. And Of course, today's focus is on the APHIS Comprehensive Learner Record, which is often a catalyst for digital transformation, which emphasizes that learning does happen inside and outside of the classroom. So, Comprehensive Learner Record has been one of those key priorities for APHIS in our quest to provide explicit evidence of student learning. And so, APHIS serves as an end-to-end CLR platform that enables you to manage and track your curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular, and experiential learning activities. And by digitizing your curriculum and assessment process, you can also pull in student prior learning and push data out onto a CLR. APHIS is the first software to be certified in IMS Global Learning Consortium CLR, and this certification is part of a suite of certifications that enable standards-based interoperability and portability of evidence of student learning. APHIS has also taken the IMS Global Standards First pledge. So if you're not familiar, Standards First is an EdTech community's call to action to ensure that we achieve open standards integrations as foundations that enable product choice, improve cost, enhance data, and student privacy. And APHIS is committed to the seamless plug-and-play integration based on open standards. Standards First begins with the pledge to make open standards the first and primary choice for integrations, and the pledge is enforced by the collective power of IMS community. Through product certification and compatibility certification, APHIS ensures consistent implementation of open standards across a broad spectrum of teaching and learning tools. And we share efficiency and standards-based assessment with many great partners, higher education institutions across the country. Today, 3 of our partner institutions are going to share their stories built around these upcoming essential questions, leading to the digital credentials transformation at their colleges and universities. So we will have 3 essential questions that our partners will be answering throughout their presentation. And as our folks over at ACRO had shared, please feel free to add some insights and questions into the Q&A chat. We will get to them at the end. And, these questions may actually get you thinking about, what's happening at your institution as well, and prep you for what you'll hear. So what are your biggest challenges in supporting your students with 21st century skill development? What successes, inroads have you experienced in your rollout of competency and skills recognition programs at your institution? And how does CLR support these initiatives? At this point, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Janet Schreck and Dr. Chadia Abras, who are at Johns Hopkins University in Maryland.
Thanks, Suzanne. Thank you all for joining us today for this, I think, important discussion that we need to be having across higher education as we really seek to sort of move a very difficult to turn large ship in how we view assessing and documenting learning. So I'm going to share with you today, along with Chadia, our vision for our comprehensive learner record at Johns Hopkins University. And I will do the disclaimer that we're really early in our journey. So we have some exemplars of success, but we have a lot of work still ahead of us. And just to, in case you're not familiar, I think most people know the name Johns Hopkins University, and we pride ourselves at being America's first research university. We're definitely a heavily focused graduate school, as you can see with many, many graduate students enrolled. We're also a highly decentralized university, probably, I would argue, one of the most decentralized across the country, in that we really operate with most power and money and resources sitting at the level of faculty, individual faculty and departments. So working on these types of university-wide initiatives and implementations can be quite challenging. We have to be very strategic in how we do so. Next slide, Suzanne. In terms of, why now? Why are we going to do the CLR now? I think we would all agree that there are numerous disruptive forces happening in higher education that were very much accelerated during the pandemic. Things like being responsible or being asked by our customers, who are our students and our families, to really show the value for their education and to really answer their demands around how we should be delivering education in the 21st century, both in terms of content, but also delivery methods and how we prepare students for their next step whether that be a job or another step into higher education through graduate school. We also know that, the skills that companies are looking for from our students, and even, as they prepare for the next step in graduate school, has really changed the nature of how we deliver our education and how we need to acknowledge that information is ubiquitous and that we have to prepare them in different ways. And so I feel like right now, higher education as a whole, as an industry, is really being challenged to revisit some very traditional pillars that we've held on to, things like the transcript and degree programs and credit hours, and things that are very long-standing hallmarks of how we deliver higher education, but may actually not be working to our advantage in preparing for this 21st century age. Next slide, Suzanne. So there are a number of Hopkins level, university-wide level initiatives that have come together that I think are creating sort of the magic moment at Hopkins within the greater context of higher education to really tackle this comprehensive learner record initiative. One initiative is we finished up our second commission on undergraduate education called Q2. And this was a really deep look at revising and really sort of upending our undergraduate curriculum. And many of the recommendations that were made by that commission of 30 plus members who met for more than 3 years to work on this report target things about the T-shaped approach to education. So how do we make sure students can dive deep into a discipline, but also get that horizontal line of all the different 21st century skills and interdisciplinary skills they need to be successful in today's society. Q2 also called for greater recognition and incorporation of learning outside traditional coursework through various experiential opportunities. We also, within the past 3 years, procured APHIS, and I will second Suzanne's comment about, I think APHIS as a tool is helping us really have some challenging conversations around digital transformation. And so while I'm not, I never believe that the tool should be the driver of all things, I think the comprehensive learner record functionality in APHIS allows faculty and others and students to think about these questions of how do you capture learning in a different way. And it gives them something tangible to hold on to. And then we can sort of do the backward design approach and say, if we want to have the CLR, what do we have to do going backwards to get there? The other initiatives, just to mention, we've got a student services excellence initiative that's really focused on making sure the experience for students at Hopkins is stellar and uniform, and that it's what we call a one university experience, getting to that point of decentralization again, that we really want our students to, if they enter through one school at Hopkins, be able to experience everything across the university. And again, the CLR is a great way to be able to capture that in a new way. The final initiative that I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about is really emerging quickly. It was already simmering before the pandemic, and I feel like it really accelerated during that. And that's that Hopkins, because of the nature of how we deliver education, we truly have everything from pre-baccalaureate enrollment all the way through to lifelong learning for senior adults through our Odyssey programs that are in non-credit work. And because we have this great ecosystem and just, wide range of programs, we'd really like to be able to harness the potential for learners to be able to track and to build upon all that learning across multiple areas. And I think we all know in higher education, we tend to really silo things, right? If you're in a 4-credit program, you can work towards a degree, but if you're in a not for credit program, you're working towards a certificate, a non-regulated thing. And we're really taking the time now to challenge those thoughts and think about, is this an opportunity now to really be able to look at credit for prior learning and stackable credentials? Next slide, Suzanne. So here you'll see our approach to lifelong learning. And this is actually from one of my colleagues in the School of Engineering, who is showing that basically we have all these different opportunities to engage at Hopkins in the School of Engineering across the lifetime. And we feel like the comprehensive learner record is the first tool that really gives us the ability to capture learning meaningfully for all of our learners across all these different touch points and build it in a meaningful, authentic, and transportable way. So, you know, we have lots of challenges, but I think every challenge is really an opportunity to grow and to change. And so if we broadly look at our CLR, it's definitely created the challenge around a culture of assessment. You know, we keep saying to the faculty when they get really excited about the CLR that, you know, the thing about the CLR is if you don't build the assessment structures that you need to support it, the CLR is empty. It's an empty shell. It's like an empty, beautiful, you know, structure that has no content. So we're really using the CLR as a mechanism to kind of push and advance the culture of assessment. We are tackling some tough questions around how do you build assessment for things like co-curriculars, extracurriculars, and non-credit offerings. You know, these are not places that have traditionally built in assessment or learning assessment in the same ways or at all in comparison to some of our academic offerings. And so we've been having some really great discussions through some CLR pilots to tackle this piece. We also have a giant ecosystem of software tools now that continues to grow with the LMS and Student Information System, APHIS, we have advising software, we have career placement software. And so we really want to begin to challenge ourselves at the university level to make sure we're managing all of those and really thinking about data integrity so that we can make things very consistent for students and the data that we're pulling out meaningful and authentic. And then I would say the last challenge we're having is really frank conversations with our various schools and divisions around alternate credentials and badging. We've made a decision at Hopkins that we really want to guard our image and guard what it means to get a Hopkins credential. And so for that reason, we're not letting our schools and programs kind of run off and proliferate a whole slew of badges. So what we're trying to do is create some guardrails, right? Where we put some process and policy in place at the central level to guide that, but that we don't do so much that we hamper innovation. And I will say we're still working to get to that balance. So with that, I'm going to hand off to Shadia Abris, who is going to talk to you a little bit more about some specific examples of our CLR and non-credit offerings at Hopkins.
Thank you, Janet. So to build on what Janet just stated, we're going to talk about the initiatives. We highlight the non-credit offerings, but also the co-curricular activities and any activities offered by our other divisions like student services will be highlighted a little bit. So in the next slide, I would like to highlight the CLR implementation goals as a whole. We one of the goals is to engage all JHU communities, whether academic programs, schools, or any of the divisions like student services, registrar, admissions, especially advising and undergraduate education as well. And to create a culture of improvement. We have to be careful not to call it between us. We call it culture of assessment, but when we're talking to faculty, it's a culture of improvement because the word assessment somehow raises some fear in them. So this is where we drive the message that this is for improving your practices and courses and the experience for the students. We want to apply, as Janet said, the CLR value chain to lifelong learning, regardless of avenue or whether academic, traditional or non-traditional offerings at the university. And one of the goals is to create processes for best practices, whether in assessment, improvement, or student experiences, and to engage everybody. The students with co-curricular, curricular records, every experience they have at Hopkins. The next goal here is what is the goal for the non-credit offering? So we have several initiatives and the non-credit is one of these initiatives. The goal here is to engage all the divisions in creating skill recognition programs. Many already had these programs, and a few I will highlight in one of the examples are creating new programs. The aim here is to support adult student learning and with their relevant experiences for their success, whether it is for new opportunities in their jobs or to change change jobs or to go back to school, any opportunities they desire, these will be part of their success journey. And one of the initiatives is to identify CEUs, or depending on divisions, they call them CEUs, executive education, CMEs, as an opportunity for supporting the lifelong learning journey of our students, and to apply the CLR value chain to lifelong learning as a whole. So the next slide is the implementation projects at the JHU include academic programs and experiential learning. And in this presentation, we're going to highlight the non-credit pilot offerings. So the non-credit pilot roadmap, that's what we propose to the divisions, is we have to look at the entry points, because as Janet mentioned earlier, we are very, very decentralized, which means at this point, each school had its own process in these CEUs, and we want to see how do we put them all under the CLR purview and umbrella. So we have to determine the entry point, whether it's student information system. We have Salesforce as one possibility, Slate and another, and individual entry points that they have through their LMSs that have built-in payments and registrations. Then we have several LMSs in the pilot at this point, and we are testing all, but in the hope that in the end, all of the schools will decide on one LMS, and hopefully it's the new acquired LMS that the school is deciding, the university is deciding on implementing very soon, which in the fall. All of it will, regardless of entry points, will channel into APHIS and to create the CLR and a digital record for the students. Next, I'm going to talk about examples that are specific for the division. We have several divisions in the pilot. Nursing is one of them. Nursing already had CEUs that they were offering, and that's what they call executive education in nursing leadership. They decided to implement one of the courses, and it's a very short 2-day course, to implement it into APHIS to track completion based on competencies. So we are in the process of creating the competencies, mapping them to assessments, creating the rubrics to create the credentialing for that one course. The hope is the pathway is micro-credentialing through several courses to stack them and create certificates in certain areas, depending on their needs. The next one is Whiting School of Engineering. This is an example of a school that did not have offerings in CEU offerings, and they hired a dean for lifelong learning. And this is his slide, actually. They are building these offerings, CEUs or executive education, on academic domains that are their strengths, basically biomedical engineering, public health, healthcare, cybersecurity, AI, but also to offer better candidates to industries that are partnering with them, such as the Defense Department or other federal agencies. They want to use the strengths of these academic domains to meet the needs of the adult learners that come from these locations or agencies, and to meet the needs of these employers. The next is School of Education. They are a small player in that space because their CEUs are centered around training teachers to be better educators in the field. And they rely very heavily on their educational perspective and competencies from the educational space to train and to stack credentials. So they are starting with one course about educational leadership. The course is being offered, it's being mapped, we're meeting with them shortly, and they will map their experiences to the field and collect data from their district as well. And they are also looking for stackable credentials and badging in the area and creating certificates. And the last but not least is the business school. Kerry Business School has a huge offering in executive education, CEUs. They have independent courses like design perspectives, leadership, and education management courses. They also have them as stackable credentials to create certificates in specific areas. We are starting with one course that they will put in APHIS, study what it would lead to, what would the CLR look like, and then try to create all the other credentials within the system. All of this is to, in hope that the CLR can support stackable credentials and badging, of course, as Janet said, created around guardrails. So we need to create guardrails of what these credentials are and how do the divisions deliver them, develop competency-based focused learning, and offer non-credit programs all through the CLR. Nobody can go an independent route, and develop and align assessment plans and collect the data into the CLR in the hope that the student can take it with them after they leave, or bring it with them if they come to Hopkins, and then create their own portfolio, digital portfolio, to present to employers or any other constituents that they would like to deal with. So this is it from the Hopkins perspective, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Chadia. Thank you, Janet. Really appreciate your perspectives here and bringing in both the CEU programs as well as your plans for undergraduate education and other academic programs. I'm going to turn things over to my colleagues over at the University of Rochester School of Nursing, Dr. Andrew Wolf and Colleen Johnson.
Thank you. Yeah, so the University of Rochester's School of Nursing is one of 6 schools within the university, and similar to what Dr. Schreck was saying about Hopkins, we are a very highly decentralized environment. So I can talk a little bit about the perspective of sort of one unit within this highly decentralized environment and how we're proceeding with the CLR. We do get a lot of support from the university in terms of, there are a lot of enablers that are coming together that are allowing us to do this. The university did invest in APHIS, which is promoting this. But a lot of the drivers are actually coming from the profession itself, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So just to give you a little bit of, in terms of the challenges that we're facing at the school, number one is the profession itself is really in the midst of a profound transition towards competency-based learning. So we're really looking at, as a profession, how are we developing our students for workforce readiness? There's a lot of evidence that we've been really struggling with that for quite some time. So we're trying to adjust our education so that it really ensures that our graduates are truly ready for practice. So from that, during that transition, our professional organizations and accreditors are really emphasizing, they want to see how our program learning outcomes are aligned to the competencies that are needed for practice. The other major driver, and just based on our own internal data, we learned that our students really were struggling to make sense of their learning across courses, across the curriculum. So the courses themselves made sense to them and students were very satisfied, but we noticed that students were having a hard time with transfer from one course to another, and oftentimes didn't even recognize that skills that they're learning in early courses are supposed to be transferred and built on in later courses. So there's a kind of a lack of coherence among students. We also, because of the limitations of our data, particularly around direct assessment of student learning, we really have had limited capacity to identify struggling students early on in the curriculum. And also, sort of part of that, not only did we struggle at an individual student level, we also had limited ability to aggregate direct measures of student learning to assess the quality of our programs and curriculum. We did attempt to launch an e-portfolio initiative a couple of years ago that was really aimed at addressing many of the issues I talked about above. But we actually had to abandon that pilot because of really technical limitations with the Blackboard e-portfolio. It was such a dissatisfier to both students and faculty that we needed to abandon it, but the issues that it addressed still remained. And then really kind of thinking about the challenges of being able to communicate the value of our education to key stakeholders, like really what is the value add for our programs for students themselves, but also employers in the community. And Colleen, I'll let you talk about some of our goals.
Thanks, Andrew. So taking those challenges and starting to walk towards solutions, we have 5 goals here that speak to what Andrew mentioned here. So increasing the coherence of curriculum and alignment, I think not only just for our students, but for faculty in the school. We talk a lot about threading courses to our students and having them understand the scaffolding and the importance of building from one course to another as they're learning. Developing the capacity for embedded assessment, I think, looking at reducing probably time on task for our faculty actually doing the assessment and being able to engage in a different way in students' learning and their curricular development, and then supporting student success. There's a lot of information that could bubble up to the surface that would allow us to be able to work with students in a different way, a more meaningful way. And then looking at developing student self-authorship, I think, we all know the research is there that if a student has a role or a part in designing their journey, then they're going to be more motivated, they're going to be invested, and it just has a really positive impact in a lot of different ways. And so looking at ways that we can engage our students to author their own journey through curricular and co-curricular. And then, talking about employer needs, having more of a focus on career readiness and actual pathways that students can see, something that's attainable for them, that follows the theory of career development and stages.
Okay, so we basically developed a blueprint with 4 steps. So the first step was really thinking about the competencies required for professional practice at various levels and being clear about the program learning outcomes that align to those competencies as well as to our mission and vision. The second was to create a curriculum map that aligned to those new competency-focused learning outcomes. To develop an assessment plan. So, not only are we aligning the courses to the program learning outcomes, but we're also ensuring that we have that alignment going out down to the assignment level. So we're able to identify signature assignments across multiple courses that are assessing students' achievement of learning outcomes as they progress through the curriculum. And then finally, the 4th step is to be able to collect all of those achievements into a comprehensive learner record that students can collate and share with key stakeholders, et cetera. So just to show you a little bit about our progress. So we started this as an initial pilot this past year in the RN2BS program. And the RN2BS program, we engaged with 12 faculty in that program, and we initiated the pilot in 3 courses with a total of 37 students in the program. And our result was that we found that all students were meeting the competencies at the time of graduation. And so next, I just want to share a little bit about, actually show you some screenshots of the overall sort of 4-step process. This is just an example of the program learning outcomes that we developed with faculty. So basically we met with small groups of faculty and developed these program learning outcomes and put them into APHIS, which enabled us to move on to the next step, which was curriculum mapping. And you can, so here we have a curriculum map where you can see on the left-hand side, there's tags that represent each of the program learning outcomes. And if you hover over any one of those, you can kind of get a little bit more detail about the information, the full program learning outcome. And you can see on the right-hand side, those are the courses that map to each of those program learning outcomes, with a short tag based on the course number. But again, if you hover over it in the system, you can see the course name and course description as well. So that's just the mapping that we digitized with the APHIS system. And then that third step is really mapping down to the assignment level and linking assignments. So you can see here that there's the screenshot only captured 2 of the program learning outcomes. And you can see on the right-hand side that that each of the program learning outcomes are linked to 1 or 2 assignments. So that first one on clinical judgment and reasoning is linked to 2 assignments in this course. And the second one, the delivery of healthcare and complex system, is linked to 1 assignment. Once we had that linking in place, it allowed us to begin to look at the data on student achievement of each of these program learning outcomes. And this is what it looks like at an aggregate level. So you can see here the first program learning outcome in this report is that program learning outcome on RN to BS, the complex systems. And you can see over on the very right hand, well, it shows that 100% of the students have achieved benchmark for that outcome. And then you can see that little bar chart on the end kind of shows you what level of proficiency that they were at. So our benchmark was really that they scored a, I can't actually read my own score there, but you can see most of the students were achieving at the proficient level, which is yellow, and then only a small number were at the mastery level. As we develop this system more and have more granularity, and we are linked to more courses and more assignments, we'll really be able to have a very nice map of where students are at in each individual course as they progress through. And it will help us to highlight any areas of weakness in the curriculum, but it will also help us to identify any individual students that may be struggling in a specific area.
So with our next steps and aspirations, one thing that I'm particularly excited about is the student-facing CLR. It goes back to my points about student self-authorship. It gives them a role in authoring their own journey, but it's accessible and self-directed. And the other thing, I think, it's come up a bit here in this session talking about advising. And so that's something we have a really a rich opportunity in the School of Nursing here, because we're also reevaluating and enhancing our academic advising. And so this was a great opportunity to kind of sync up with Andrew here, because this could be something that's accessible to a student success network, right? And so that could then lead to more meaningful dialogue and direction for students as it relates to what they see here for opportunities. And I think it's a great way to link co-curricular and curricular together, so that the co-curricular doesn't remain as an outlier for an experience for students. And so the other thing that's nice too is student affairs. I think this was mentioned earlier. It can sometimes have a hard time finding a spot in the world of assessment, right? And academic assessment being very different than student services assessment. And so this is a really wonderful opportunity here for students to see that everything is indeed connected to the student experience. And so this is quite exciting.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Andrew, for providing your specific case in using CLR at the University of Rochester School of Nursing. And I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Sherry Braxton, who'll talk a little bit about her experiences at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County.
Thanks, Suzanne. So as you can see, the University of Maryland, Baltimore County was founded in 1966. It's one of 12 System of Maryland schools. You see the demographics there. The president is Freeman Hrabowski, and the work that we've done could not have been done without his leadership and support, as well as the support of the CIO there, Jack Seuss, and our academic partners. So the work that we're doing, next slide, Suzanne, is focused around alignment with workforce needs. And so there's a really great article in the Harvard Business Review that talks about the problem we're trying to solve. Employers are looking for unbundled degrees. They want to know specific skills and competencies that their students are coming out of our schools with that they can apply immediately. And we've seen organizations like Google and Walmart, they've started to create their own certification programs because they're not getting what they need out of our traditional higher ed structures. So what we're looking to do is unbundle those degrees so that we can identify those specific skills and abilities that these employers are looking for. And we're working in collaboration with them so that we can ensure that once our students leave our institutions, they're ready to hit the ground running in their organizations. So next slide. So the work that we've done so far at UMBC around the CLR is in fact looking at this employer and higher ed alignment. And our work was done through the pilot initiative sponsored by ACRO, NASPA, and NILOA. And we're really looking at students who are pursuing non-technical majors at the university for this pilot around this digital credential. So next slide, Suzanne. So the organization within our national capital region that's really helping us to make these workforce higher ed alignments is called the Greater Washington Partnership. And so the CEOs between Baltimore and Richmond have set up this organization called the Capital Co-Lab that's working to define what are those skills that they need our students to come out of our institutions with, and how can we ensure that they are being assessed and can demonstrate those skills as they move into their different career fields. So next slide. I'm just bringing up this slide just so you can see the challenge, right? This is the problem we're trying to address. Our region is third largest in the economy in the United States and the seventh largest globally. And so we really are looking to improve the pipeline of tech adjacent and tech savvy workers as they move through K through 12 up into our institutions and are prepared to enter this economy. So next slide. Again, this is a slide just to give you an idea of where we sit nationally in this need. These tech-oriented workforces from New York to Boston, national capital regions right there in the middle with employment needs for these types of skills. So next slide, Suzanne. And so the companies that are involved in the Capital Co-Lab are here on this slide. You know, you've got your defense contractors to your big guys like Amazon and Under Armour. And they're working hand in hand with our academic leaders and our different departments across these institutions to define what are these knowledge, skills, and abilities. How do we translate our language of Bloom's taxonomy into competencies and skills that can be assessed and demonstrated once they're in the workforce? So we're not just talking about the tech jobs, we're talking about tech adjacent jobs, right? So we know that all students aren't going to be STEM majors. We've got humanities majors, English majors, and these people can work in these tech adjacent positions, given that they have the right skills they need to be able to translate and work with data and understand data ethics and those types of things. So next slide, we'll start to look at what the vision here is. So our capital region is really trying to create the most diverse tech workforce in the country, and to make sure that we've engaged with students from K through 12 up into our institutions on these pathways that we're creating so that they'll be able to enter the workforce quickly and efficiently and effectively hit the ground running and contributing to these different companies. So in doing so, there are two types of credentials that are being developed in conjunction with the CoLab. The one that focuses on our non-STEM majors, those undergrads in fields of humanities and logistics and finance, those what we're calling those tech adjacent majors. We have developed a generalist credential for those. But in this area, there are also really needs for specialists in key areas. You can imagine, given that we're in the National Capital Region, cybersecurity, machine learning, and data analytics are really key skills that are needed across the board for those who are even STEM majors that might not be focused specifically in these particular specialists. So next slide. So what the institutions are doing is finding different pathways for students to be able to reach these competencies. And so at UMBC, students can take some programming courses, can take some statistics courses, but we realized that those non-tech majors may not be taking these courses. So we needed to create other pathways for them to be able to gain the competencies around this digital generalist credential that you're going to see. And so there are 6 competencies associated with the digital generalist credential: the role of data and analytics, prob stats, data manipulation, data visualization and communication, data ethics, and data security. So we needed to come up with a way that would not require students to change their course of study, that will allow them to still gain these ASAs, these knowledge, skills, and abilities in some sort of mechanism through what our offerings on campus, free of charge to them. And so these are the KSAs as defined by this collaboration across these different competency areas. And it's not in our eye chart, just so you get a sense of what we needed to look for in our current curriculum and to determine what we needed to create in order for them to be able to achieve these competencies. So in our particular instance, University of Maryland, Baltimore County chose to create some edX modules around the 6 competencies. So we looked at our courses, we identified where there were gaps in the courses and the assessments, and we actually used our faculty members as SMEs who were teaching courses related to these competencies and created these individual modules that students would be able to complete and be assessed through to achieve each of the individual badges. So we're badging each competency that are stacking to the overall digital generalist credential. And so you see the 6 stackable badges and the Uber badge in the middle there, which is the generalist credential. So our process was pretty consistent with what you've heard already. We had to identify courses where competencies were addressed. And then we had to secure that faculty SME support. So the faculty who were teaching these courses stepped up to be SMEs with compensation to help us develop the modules that were used to support this work. And as all the others you've heard here have discussed, we had to map those competencies against those course objectives and identify the gaps and do that curriculum alignment, which was very eye-opening to many faculty when we said, they're like, oh yeah, we cover this in our course. And we said, well, how do you assess it? They're like, oh, so, you know, it's an eye-opener and an aha moment for faculty to really make sure that alignment is sound and traceable. So we worked with them to develop those and design and implement the modules and then roll them out to students in our pilot. So next slide. So this is the crazy spaghetti chart that we had to use when we first started looking at our courses and looking at those KSAs and figuring out which courses the KSAs were addressed in. So all of our initial work before we adopted APHIS was done with spreadsheets and these crazy diagrams. And you can imagine showing that to faculty is enough to make them run away, not to mention our instructional designers trying to support this work. So next slide. In doing so, you know, we had to get organized and do this work, identify our SMEs in the courses and where the gaps existed. Next slide, Suzanne, and then identify that curriculum mapping piece. And so I show you this so that you can see that we made ensure we had traceability, not just for our work, but for the employers. If they asked, well, where did you assess students were, you know, understood the fundamentals of risk management, how did you assess that? We could trace that back for them through the objectives, all the way through the content and the assessment piece. But APHIS has simplified this process for us significantly as we use the curriculum mapping tool and the assessment and outcomes tools that are part of that package. And so we're rolling out the generalist credential right now. We're badging students in those individual competencies and are just starting to do that same work that you saw on the alignment and curriculum mapping for the specialist credentials.
Thank you, Sherry, for sharing that. I'm going to move over to Q&A. I've seen some questions and answers, well, questions mostly coming in. And I'm going to ask our colleagues over at ACRO to start to, share those out with us. Are we good, ACRO folks? Unfortunately, I can't see the Q&A, so I'm going to ask Anetta or Summer to kind of support this.
Suzanne, I can see the Q&A.
Oh, great.
Kind of take a first shot. So
Go for it. Yeah.
There were some questions that came in for my segment, or Shadia's of my segment, around if we were beginning to allow for credit for prior learning. And, I mentioned we're dipping our toe in the pool. I get the sense that I believe it was Susan Moyer who asked the question. I think there's different views around this for different regulators. And I'm getting the sense that wherever Susan is, there's more support for it. I will say we're in a rather challenged location in Maryland. We're regulated, Sherry will know this. We're regulated highly by the Maryland Higher Education Commission, who still has things in the law like distance education includes learning by video cassette. So, we have some work to do. There is a work group convening this summer to look at credit for prior learning, and I'm part of that work group, so we're going to drive some change. But I will say, I think we're dipping our toe in, and I will also say, Hopkins is careful. We don't want to kind of upset the apple cart too much, and we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. So it's absolutely part of our plan. We know that accreditors are indicating they're open to it, but I think we want to be careful that we get our ducks in a row at the state level and with our specialized accreditors, and truthfully that we build really sound assessment practices before we really throw the switch fully on that. There was another set of questions though that came in that I actually don't know the answer to, so I'm going to throw it out to the panel. Carmi, I hope I'm saying your name right, asked, is anyone using self-sovereign digital identities and verifiable credentials?
Yeah, so that's the CLR, and that's the standard within IMS Global. And so that is why that was really important for me to share up front, to say that you would know that APHIS is the first to achieve the certification in CLR, and all of those specifications for CLR are on the IMS Global website. And that self-sovereignty is a huge part. Privacy is a huge part as well. Students are able to choose, so they'll have a verified record, from Johns Hopkins or from UMBC or University of Rochester. But I'll use Sherry's example, they may just want to share out their generalist information, just the information, the badges associated with the, them achieving, the digital generalist achievement over at UMBC. They may not choose to share anything else other than that because that's related to the job that they're going for. Or for a Rochester point of view, the folks that are in the RN to BS program might just want to show some very specific assignments aligned to those competencies to an employer, particularly if they're going to go into, let's say, diabetes management or something very, very specific. They have the ability to create their own individual portfolios from the large groups of data points that have been collected on them for their 4 or 6 or whatever number of years in a professional program. So we do abide by that, and that is part of our membership to IMS Global, to say that is the way that we were creating our CLR, with the student first in mind, but also with the ability that institutions would be able to sort of see how their students are performing overarchingly, so that they could make changes, as Janet talked about earlier on, into their curriculum to meet the needs of students. So
and
that's
Susanna,
the answer. Yeah.
I think Carmi's questions are the IMS standards consistent with the W3C standards on digital credentialing. And Carmi, yes, that they are. In fact, the folks who are working on those standards are well informed and are plugged into all those other standards work that's happening with W3C.
Thanks, Sherry. Yeah.
Yep.
That's the bulk of the questions I saw, Suzanne. I mean, Carmi sent a couple follow-ups and is asking for the IMS link, which I think Shadia might have just shared.
Yeah. For sure. I'm also going to share with you a hub that the folks over myself and APHIS and various members of our community have put together, and it is our CLR resource hub. And let's see if this will open. Oh, I actually know that I have it open. Hold on, in another screen. Stand by. Love it when that happens, guys. There we go. Nope, wrong one. I will find it for you and show you. But essentially that link there that I had open, which is the CLR link, and I think the team will probably put it into the chat as well, will bring you to a content hub where we've curated all of these different resources. There are links to IMS Global as well here, and you'll be able to kind of see other events that have been done, boot camps on curricular mapping. One in particular is, this information about, CLR and what the specs are. This gives you some further background on the specs, as well as the link to the IMS Global Learning Consortium and the specific information about the standard, as well as a press release, which includes some conversational points from Rob Abel. So feel free to, kind of go through this hub and connect with other members of the community who are doing some really great things in comprehensive learner record. By moving down here into this network, you can see there's other people, and you can sort of like just choose competency-based education or comprehensive learner record and connect with folks, including the folks that are here today who have shared their story so humbly. They're all at different points, as you can see, based on the discussion points today. But APHIS Academy is our space that brings together folks like you've seen here, as well as other resources and events on demand that you can access to kind of start off your CLR journey wherever you are. We also put in some great resources on from the NILOA site about the backward design and some of the areas of challenge that you might have based on past practice. And if you're familiar with NILOA, they put out a lot of different papers, focused on key areas of concern or challenge or innovation that's going on. So we have a lot of those resources also in that CLR hub. Thank you so much for joining us today, and appreciate our academic leaders taking the time to tell their story. Again, they're in different stages of their story, and I'm sure if we checked in with them, as late as only a couple of months from now, let's say August, they'd be even further along in what they're trying to do. My name is Suzanne Carbonero, and I represent the APHIS team and the partners here today, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. You can catch this on demand on both the ACRO site, and I'll also be adding it to the APHIS Academy site. So if you missed anything or you wanted to go back, you can certainly do that, and feel free to connect with all of these academic leaders as well. Have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week, and good luck with your CLR initiatives. Take care.